Good afternoon, guys. Happy Wednesday. I hope your day is going well. Just wanted to take another minute to walk with Jesus. This is the Bible reading plan that we've been following to help us navigate through the Bible, the whole Bible in 1 year. Now, of course, the goal is not just to read through the Bible, but just to learn and to glean as much from it as we can as we go along day by day. And so with that said, today's reading is supposed to be from the book of Numbers, chapters 13 and 14. However, I would be highly remiss if I did not make a pit stop in the book of Numbers, chapter 6. This is one of my favorite passages. It always ministers to me. And one of my favorite Bible characters that we'll talk about on Friday night. This passage really applies to the life and character of that person, but we'll talk about him on Friday night. So in the meantime, here's Numbers chapter 6, and the title of the chapter is The Nazarite. The Nazarite. And I'm sure you're asking yourself, what the heck is a Nazarite and what does that mean? And so maybe the easiest way I can try to explain what a Nazarite is to distinguish it from something that you may have been more familiar with, that you've heard before, a Nazarene. And a Nazarene is someone who comes from the city of Nazareth, right? For example, Jesus was the most well-known Nazarene, him being called Jesus of Nazareth because he was born in Bethlehem, but he was raised in the city of Nazareth. And so henceforth he was called Jesus of Nazareth. The term Nazarite, however, has nothing to do with where you're born or raised, nothing to do with that. And we'll get into it in a minute, but just a simple Google definition, nothing scientific about this, but very simply looking at Google, the term Nazarite comes from the Hebrew word meaning consecrated or separated, and may ultimately be derived from the root meaning to vow. So those are some of the words that come into play in terms of defining what a Nazarite is or was. And all those things really have meaning in this definition: consecration, separation, and vow. And that's exactly what the term Nazarite really means, right? And so, and just to point out that Jesus himself was not a Nazarite. His lifestyle and the things that he did, we'll see, did not fall in line with the definition and requirements of a Nazarite, but that's okay. Jesus wasn't called to be a Nazarite. He had a different calling, which he fulfilled, but he himself was not a Nazarite. There are other examples in the Bible of men who were Nazarites. Those being, number one was the prophet Samuel in the Old Testament. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, you'll see that his mother dedicated him and brought him to the temple at a young age and dedicated him and said that a razor would never cut his hair, which is one of the requirements for a Nazarite. There are a few others. There's John the Baptist in the book of Luke chapter 1, when the angel spoke to his parents, gave instructions on how to raise him, said no drink, no fermented wine or drink would touch his lips. So that's another requirement that we'll see. And also in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, in the book of Acts 21, he also took a Nazarite vow for a set period of time, which also comes into play in this definition as well and in this passage. So let's unpack it a little bit more. Let's get into Numbers chapter 6. What are we talking about here? And again, for those that have been following along, you may recall that we've been reading from the book of Leviticus, and that talked a lot about the Levites, the priests, and also in the earlier chapters of the book of Numbers. So all these chapters that we've been reading have dealt with the priests, the Levites, the tabernacle, the sanctuary, all the things that God had instructed Moses and the people to build and how to conduct and how to come forward in terms of offering proper sacrifices and worship unto the Lord, right? So all that has been going on. And now we have we insert this passage here on the Nazarite, which is still related in terms of worship and in terms of how to offer up offering unto the Lord, but just different. Also, the fact that before, everything we talked about was related to priests and the priesthood and things that only they could do. Whereas we're going to see here that this applies to any person, any common normal day person could apply to, and they could fulfill this requirement if they wanted to worship God in this way. Okay, so this is for everyone. So Numbers chapter 6 verse 1 says, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, he says, if a man or a woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite, ... I just want to point out very quickly that also, meaningfully, that this is the first time we have the reference to women also as being able to come and participate in this form of worship. And that's different. Anything that we read before with the Levites, the priests, it was all about men doing these acts of worship. And this might be the first time that we introduce women into this opportunity to worship God in this way, right? And so if a man or a woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite. So we're going to get into what the requirements were, but we can see that this thing called the Nazirite is a special vow, a special dedication, a special consecration. This is a form of worship when we want to do something, when they wanted to do something different, something out of the norm. This is what they could do to worship God in this special way. So if a man or woman wanted to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite, here's one of the requirements. They must abstain from wine and other fermented drink and must not drink vinegar made from wine or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice, no Welch's, nothing. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins, just bran, no cereal with raisins, just bran cereal, pretty plain, pretty lame. As long as they remain under their Nazirite vow, they must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. And I love this passage, and I know we're sitting here saying, okay, Fabian, what does this have to do with me? And as we like to say, the price of tea in China. What does this have to do with anything we're doing, or living in today as modern day Christians? And that's a fair point. And so I have to ask myself, okay, what's the relation? What's the connection here? And one thing that I can say is that, when God instructs in this way, and he instructs the people to abstain from a certain thing for a certain time, that kind of resonates with me as a fast, a form of fasting. And for example, when I look in the book of Matthew chapter 6, and Jesus, this is part of his teaching on the Mount, chapter 6, verse 16, Jesus instructs his disciples and those following him. He says, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites, do not do like this, do it like this. So he gives instructions on when you fast, meaning not if you fast, but when you fast. So my point being that fasting is something that we're called to do, that even Jesus instructed us to do, not as an option, but something that we should be doing and should be part of our daily form of worship unto the Lord in some way, shape, or form. As disciples, we need to discipline ourselves, and fasting is a way to discipline ourselves, to give up something in the natural for something supernatural, right? To get ourselves closer to God. This is one way of doing it, is by fasting and abstaining from certain pleasures, so we can, in our spirit man, grow stronger and draw closer to God. Make sense? Okay, so going back to the book of Numbers, I see this, that God is instructing the people to do as a form of fasting. And in this case, he specifically calls out abstaining from wine and other fermented drink. And what I get out of it, again, the point here is not to say that drinking wine or drinking alcohol or drinking fermented drink is a sin. That's not the point here. That's not the key. That's not the message that I get, and nor the message that I'm trying to convey. What I get out of it more so is a couple of things. One is the exactitude of God. That's one thing that we've seen the specificity of God, the directness, the exactitude. Like we see when he gave Noah the instructions to build the ark, when he gave Moses the instructions to build a tabernacle, when he gave Moses the instructions on how the priests were to perform their priestly duties, what sacrifices to bring, how to bring the animals to worship for sacrifice. So all these things, we see the level of detail that God goes to get his message across. As if you want to worship me, this is the way you're going to do it. Not just any old way, not just any way you want. You don't come into my house this way. This is the way you come and present offering unto me. So God was very specific in what he communicated to Moses and the people in the instruction that he gave for the people to come and to worship him. And here again is that level of detail where God says, don't drink wine or any fermented drink. And he goes on to say even further, don't even drink grape juice, not even the grapes or the raisins or any derivation thereof of the grape. So God is being very exact, very detailed, and he's calling us to go deeper, to go, above and beyond the call. He's calling us to go the extra mile. So there's no confusions. There's no form of being tainted with such a thing. He says, go the extra mile. I want you to go deeper. I want you to go all in for me in this season. And he goes on further to say, as long as you remain under this vow, don't eat nothing from the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. And again, that also resonates and ministers to me because I believe God is, again, being a God of detail and just calling us to, if we're going to do this, to be all in, to be fully consecrated. Like when the Apostle Paul says, therefore, brothers, in view of God's mercies, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, which is your proper form of worship. Again, as a sacrifice, offer ourselves as living sacrifices, fully, totally, holy, WHOLLY, to be all in and fully consecrated, not half-stepping, not halfway in, halfway out. Again, I want to also be careful to say, I'm not speaking again from a place of perfection. I'm very much speaking from a place of imperfection and as a participant in this race alongside you, because I fall short in many ways on many days in trying to carry this out. But, I just believe that this is the way God is speaking to us, to go all in, to dig deep, to draw closer, to give up everything. So there's no confusion. There's no is it this or is it that? There's no gray line. It's black, it's white. Let's go all in, right? In whatever in whatever area of our life that may be. There may be other addictions or things that we struggle with. There may be other areas that we're trying to purify, that we're trying to clean up and get away from. If I just identify the elephant in the room in terms of, being single and sexual purity, right? Which is, let's face it, not easy for anyone, myself included. But I believe this is the level of detail that we can apply to, where it's well, I might do this, but I won't do that. God is saying, you know what? Don't do any of that. No seeds, no skins, nothing. Don't touch it. Don't go near it. Don't even look like you're going near it. I think this is where God is taking us, where he's saying, like the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, he says, come out from them and be separate, he says. Touch no unclean thing, nothing, zip, zilch, nada, right? That's what he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 6. And I think that's what we're looking here, what we're seeing here. It's not about the wine. It's not about the drink. It's not about the thing itself. It's about the heart posture and how God is calling us to be pure, to be holy, to be consecrated, to be separated, and to be all in, withholding nothing, to be totally consumed as a sacrifice unto him, to be all in, withholding nothing, giving over fully to the Lord. That's where I think we're going here today. And so I want to just pause there and let that settle in and marinate and just, encourage us to try to live this way, to, try to make this sacrifice, to look at ourselves and our lives and what are areas, Fabian, that some things that I need to cut out, that I can't even go near, no seeds, no skins, no variation thereof of it, that I need to completely and wholly stay away from. And so that's what I want to encourage us to do, starting with myself, to think and to reflect about ourselves. What are some things and areas in our lives that we need to completely and wholly stay away from. Amen, guys. I'm going to pause there and we'll continue with the chapter tomorrow. Take care.